Okay, welcome back. Chapter 108, Kapitel Kuf Ches. If you're using the Kufas Tehillim, we are on page 136. Okay, like we usually do, we'll go through it once with a basic translation, and then we'll try to go through it with a little bit of a deeper understanding. Shir Mizmar LeDavid, a song, a psalm, LeDavid, for David or by David. Nachain Libi Elikim, my heart is straight or correct. Ashira va'azamra, I will sing. Two types of singing. I'll chant, he says over here, but there's, I think one of them is singing, and the other one is more with singing together with musical instruments. Af kvoidi, also my honor. Ura hanevel v'chinar, wake up my lyre and harp. Ira shachar, I will wake up the dawn. Oidcha ba'amim Hashem, I will thank you, Hashem, amongst the nations. Va'azamercha ba'ala umim, and I'll sing your praises amongst the nations. Ki gadol me'al shamayim chazdecha. For your chesed, your kindness, is greater and it is above the heavens. Me'al shamayim, above the heavens. Va'ad shchakim amisecha, and until the sky is your emes, your truth. Ruma al shamayim elikim, you're exalted over the heavens, Hashem, v'al kol haaretz kvedecha, and your honor is on the land. Pasuk 7, L'man yecholtzun yididecha, so that your friends should be delivered. Hoshia yemincha v'aneni, help, help with your right hand and answer me. Elikim diber b'kachai, God has spoken Bekachai in His holiness. Eloiza, Eloiza is like when it like tucked away, exalted. Chalka Shechem, I will divide Shechem, ve'emek Sukkos, and the valley of Sukkos, Amaded, I will measure. Li Gilad, li Menashe, ve'Ephraim, Moiz Reishi. Gilad is mine, Menashe is mine, and Ephraim is my headquarters, or how does he translate it over here? My stronghold, yeah. Yehuda mechaykiki, Yehuda, my prince. Moyav, Sir, Rachzi, Moyav is Sir, is a wash basin, is a place where a Sir is like a bucket of water. Rachzi al Edem, Rachzi, it's a basin, it's a bucket full of water, Rachzi, to wash. Al Edem ashlech nali, on Edem I will throw my shoe. Ale pleshes Esraya, and on the Philistines, on Pelishtim, Esraya, I will shout. Mi yavileni ir mivtzar, who will bring me to a fortified city? Mina chani ad Edom, who will lead me onto Edom? Haloi elikim zenachtanu, Hashem, you have forsaken us. Seitze elikim b'tzivaseinu, and you did not go forth with our armies. It seems that this is with a question mark, meaning it's that you did, not that like will you, that haloi, didn't you? And Pasuk 13, Havalanu ezos mitzar, help us, bring us help, mitzar, from our oppressors. Vishav chuas adam, and the help of humans, of man, is shav, is futile. And the final pasuk, Be'elikim nasechayil, with through Hashem we will be successful. Chayil, v'hu yavus tzarenu, and He will trample our oppressors. So this is a very typical chapter in Tehillim, where if you try to translate it, you get a little stuck. You know, like, what's the psukim trying to say? The words are very easily translated. It sounds like a beautiful chapter. It sounds like it wants to tell us something beautiful. But what's going on over here? So as I mentioned in the email, so as I mentioned in the email, this is a repetition of a few verses in two different chapters. If I remember correctly, chapter 57, chapter 57 and chapter 60. They're over there. It's talking about David HaMelech. and it's a David Melech. It's in a war in Aram Tzova, right? There's also one of them is about a war, and one of them is when he was running away from King Saul, from Shaul Melech. Those are the two places that all these verses, except for verse number 1, right? So the first 5 verses, so verse 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 are from chapter 57, and then the last 8 verses are from chapter 60. So what's the story over here? Why would we repeat it, right? We have it already in Tehillim. Why would we repeat it? It's interesting that I have a vague idea of Daka that it's repeated, even though I say Tehillim so many times, to remember that, oh, I said something similar to exactly like this. It's not easy to remember that. But it's almost exactly the same words. So what's the story over here? Any ideas?
You're saying that several verses.
All the verses besides verse number 1 are a basic repetition of verses that we have in chapter 57 and 60.
So maybe there's elements of 57 and 60 that come together to give a different meaning.
Oh, not maybe. It's got to be, right? It can't be just a repetition. If you want a repetition, you could put in the Tehillim, say, okay, when you get after chapter 107, go back and say chapter 57, Or a lot of the commentaries, when it comes to insight in chapter 108, they say, we already gave a lot of commentary on what these words mean. Go back to chapter 57 and 60, right? I was tempted to just put a recording of my class from chapter 57 and 60 over here, and then I don't even have to show up. But obviously, that's not good enough, right? Obviously, if it was repeated in Tehillim, and not only was it repeated in Tehillim, it's not taken in one chunk and repeated over here in Tehillim, right? It's taken 2 parts, and it's not the full chapter 57, it's not the full chapter 60. Taking parts of chapter 50, chapter 60, obviously together, there's a new meaning, there's something new that it needs to be together for. The Meiri says, and I've seen it in a few commentaries, but I think they all take it from the Meiri, that in the other chapters it's very clear, because of the introduction of what's going on. David HaMelech is running away from King Shaul, from Saul, and he composes a song. Right? David HaMelech is having a war in Aram Tzova, and therefore he composes in Aram Naraim and Aram Tzova, and therefore he composes a psalm, and this is how his service of Hashem, etc., etc. But then taking those two together, especially as we mentioned already, that in this last book that we just started with last chapter, which started the 5th book of the 5 books of Tehillim, is talking a lot about Mashiach, about the time to come. So David Melech puts it together, Shir Mizmar LeDavid. He takes those songs and says, yes, they were very applicable and apropos then when I said it in those times. But now we're going to take it again and put it together again and use it separately to talk about something else. So Miri talks about the Arichas HaGalos, the length of Galos, and the fact that these verses bring out the idea of the length of Galos in a prayer form of enough of Galos already. When's Mashiach going to come already? Right? And some others say that it's one step further, that David HaMelech composed it for Mashiach, right? That there is the composing of a psalm for King David, for the way he's dealing with his troubles, and then there's another way to when we're talking about when Mashiach comes, and therefore it's also slightly different and only handpicked which verses are used over here because it's talking about another time. So there's the time of King David, and there's the time of Mashiach.
Question for you.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with it, but why do they list off the day 23, but they don't do it for all of them? There's a few of them that say day 21, 22, 23.
So chapter 108 starts day 23. So on day 23, you do 108, 109, 110, 111, 112, and that's it. And then on day 24, you start chapter 113. When it says day 23, it means that's where you start for day 23. But you go until day 24. Yeah. And that's in the Chabad custom. Specifically, we do that every day. And through the month, you finish it. There's different ways you could say Tehillim. You could say Tehillim from beginning to end. And in the Chabad custom, we do that every Shabbos Mevarchim, the Shabbos before we bless a new month. So ideally, early in the morning, before davening to go through the whole Tehillim, and ideally even with a minyan. So in religious communities where you can get more than 10 men that are going to say Tehillim, and then in between every book, it's 5 books. In between every book, anybody who's saying Kaddish is in the year or has yard site that day will say Kaddish in between each of us. So it'll be 5 Kaddishes that are said like that. That's and then there's another time of the year also during Sukkot, the end of Sukkot, last night of Chol Hamoed Sukkot, that also we have the custom of Shina Rabbah that the night after midnight to say the whole Tehillim. On average, a person that says the whole Tehillim on a regular basis, like monthly, like that, on average, it takes them about an hour and a half to say the whole Tehillim from cover to cover. It takes me an hour and 35 minutes when I focus. If I'm up in the morning and Meir Shleima is also up in the morning and I have to give him breakfast in the middle and after this, it takes me quite a bit longer. And then sometimes I don't finish before davening and I finish the rest after davening. But yeah, that's one process of saying the whole Tehillim. There's also, you can't take that away, right? If someone wants to say Tehillim, whether it's for a specific reason or just wants to praise Hashem, you could open up the Tehillim and say any chapter in Tehillim, or any chapter that talks to you, or any chapter randomly. It's always a very good thing to say Tehillim in general, right? Then there's two ways that it's split. It could be split in the days of the week, and it could be split in the days of the month. So if you look at the top, you see it says on this one, it says Psalms for Friday, right? Because the Tehillim is also split into 7. So if someone wants to finish the whole Tehillim within a week, they could say the first, if I remember correctly, it's the first 30 chapters, then the next 20 something chapters, and it's a process, and you could finish it during the week. In Chabad we don't do that, but in the Chabad custom is that we do it based on the month, and that's why you see chapter 108. It says for day 23. So when it's Chav Gimel of the month of whatever, we say these chapters. And the only thing is that you have to keep in mind that if you're doing it in that way, every second month on the Jewish calendar, on average, every second month is 29 days. So when it's 29 days, you do the 29 and 30th part of Tehillim. But otherwise, it's pretty straightforward. But there's different ways that we split up the Tehillim, and this is the Chabad approach, is that we do it based on the day of the month. So that way, within 30 days, we finish the Tehillim. Which brings, I try at least, but I'm usually successful, that monthly I say the Tehillim with the daily Tehillim, the Shabbos Mevarchim, the Tehillim. So every month I'm saying Tehillim twice from cover to cover. And then Shina Rabbah, we say Tehillim that night. So on average, a year, I say the Tehillim about 25 times, cover to cover. Yeah. And then to teach it is taking us 4 years. Yeah. Okay. So I don't know if you remember, because we were on a long Pesach break since last chapter, but the last chapter, chapter 107, it was a fascinating chapter, and it talked about the 4 categories of Jews that need to thank Hashem, right? There's Arba Tzrichim L'Haides, it's a famous Gemara, Mishnah, that there's 4 scenarios where a person has to thank Hashem. We do it today by coming to the Torah and making a special bracha. It's called Hagoimel. Back in the days of the temple, they would bring a special sacrifice, a carbon taida, a sacrifice of thanks to Hashem, except for Pesach, because it was a chametz sacrifice. But what are the 4 categories? A person that went into the hospital and came out okay, right? So his life was in danger. A person that traveled through the desert, also because his life was in danger, right? A person who traveled over the sea, also his life was in danger and he made it, right? And a person who was incarcerated and came out of jail. He has to, so that's the Arba Tzrichim L'Haides, and we went through this at length in the last chapter, in chapter 107. So the Rebbe, oh, by the way, it's another thing, when we're talking about saying Tehillim, the Chabad custom also is to say Tehillim connected to your age. So it's not the age that you are, it's the year that you're in. So if you're, for a baby that's just born, he's 0 years old, we say chapter 1. When he turns 1, he goes into his 2nd year, so we say chapter 2. So a person that's 40 years old says chapter 41, right? That's the process. It's another thing that we say Tehillim every day, so we say also that chapter. Also Chabad custom is saying chapter 20 after davening. So and we still say the Rebbe's chapter. So the Rebbe's chapter, the Rebbe, if he would be alive today, would be 123 years old. So we say chapter 124 after davening in honor of the Rebbe. So when the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe's age turned to 107, so therefore it became chapter 108, the Rebbe spoke about chapter 108. And the Rebbe said that it has to be, since there's a progression here, and in general, when it comes to Judaism, a progression always needs to be a positive. Something has to be better than yesterday, right? So the chapter 108 has to be better than chapter 107, has to be the next level. It can't be a continuation, it can't be less, right? Because Malim B'Kodesh, we have a general concept that we go up in holiness. We always grow in our holiness. We don't diminish our holiness, right? If we were doing 5 mitzvahs today, tomorrow you got to do 6 mitzvahs, right? We don't. If you did 5 mitzvahs today, you can't say tomorrow I'm taking a break, I'm doing no mitzvahs, or I did 5, so tomorrow I could just do 4. No, we always need to grow, and everything that we do in life, we always need to grow. That's why Hashem created us, especially in our spiritual life, but in general, everything, even in business. Can you imagine if someone says, I'm okay. I had 5 clients today. Okay, tomorrow I'll be okay with 0. No, if you did 5 today, tomorrow I got to be 6. Right? Or however it translates in everybody's personal life. So the Rebbe says that chapter 108, since it comes after chapter 107, it has to be greater because of Mailam HaKodesh. And the Rebbe says that in chapter 107, we talked about individuals that need to thank Hashem, right, for something special that happened to them. In chapter 108, it's about the general public. It is about a general redemption, a redemption of all people. And therefore, all of them together are praising Hashem when Mashiach comes. And not only Jews, even non-Jews will praise and thank Hashem. So therefore, it is unique. It is a unique chapter. Not a unique chapter. It is a step up from the previous chapter. The previous chapter is about individuals thanking Hashem. Chapter 108 is about the general public thanking Hashem. Okay, with that, we're going to go into the chapter. There's no line on top. There's no introduction to the chapter. We go straight inside Shir Mizmor LeDavid. Pasuk number 1 doesn't need any explanation. This is a psalm by David. Nachen libesher. So pasuk base. So first of all, nachen. If you translate it very, very literally, it's a little bit hard to understand. It doesn't mean that my heart is straight or my heart is steadfast, right? So this is a special connection, to Hashem. So Rashi says, "Nachen libi." My heart is straight, or steadfast, is that's faithful to you. My heart is faithful to you, Hashem. Right? And Ashira, I will sing Af Kvaidi, even though some people might look at it that it's not my honor. It's beyond my honor, that it's not honorable for. You ever think about something, like sages back in the day would do things, let's say, it brings down in the Gemara, where sages would what's it called, would juggle or something like that, by a wedding and stuff like that. Maybe it's beyond their, no, it's nothing's beyond it. If for the sake of heaven, it's not beyond my honor. Or Rashi also says, the person that David is saying, I'm not going to be looking for honor through this. The Radak says that the pasuk is coming to say that even though we've been godless for many years, we haven't given up, right? Nachin libi, my heart is straight. I know exactly what we need. I know exactly what we want. We're waiting for Mashiach, and we're looking forward to Geula. He says, Vazamra af kvaidi, that kvaidi is referring to the honor that it's referring to. It's referring to the neshama. It's referring to the soul. The Alshich says that Nochain libi elikim, that I prepare. Nochain is it could also be translated as a sort of a preparation. So he says, I prepare myself. Nochain libi, I prepare myself in holiness, elikim, with Hashem, with holiness, and then I sing. And so I prepare myself. Nochain, I prepare myself. Then I sing. What am I singing? I'm singing praises of Hashem, and then Af kvaidi, now I'm ready for that kavod. What's the kavod? So the kavod is not necessarily talking about honor. It's talking about it's referring to the Shekhinah, Hashem's glory, Hashem's kavod that comes down here, right? So I prepare myself spiritually, and then I sing Hashem's praises, which helps bring the Shekhinah, brings the Ruach HaKodesh and the Shekhinah down here below. Pasuk number 3. So Ura Nevel V'Chinor Ir Shachar, when we said it in the previous in chapter 57, this is a very powerful statement. There's a lot to talk about. I mean, it's not a lot. There's a lot. The Medrash brings up the famous story, and Rashi brings it up again over here that the other kings, the dawn wakes them up. Right? If you leave your shades open in your bedroom, so as the sun rises, so it wakes people up. The sun rises, and that's why people wake up. But David Melch says, me, I'm not like that. Ura nevel v'chiner. So I'm up with my harp and lyre, and oh, ira shachar, I wake up the dawn. What does it mean that I wake up the dawn?
And you wake up the dawn?
What that David Melch is saying, that he wakes up the dawn. What does it mean that he wakes up the dawn?
Starts the process, the awakening.
He can't do anything to wake up. He can't do anything to the dawn. But the fact that he didn't go to sleep, right? He's not sleeping and dawn wakes him up. The sunlight in the bedroom wakes him up. No, he's already up from midnight. The medrash, the famous medrash that the wind would come and blow and a ruch, it's fine if I remember correctly. A northern wind would come and blow the strings of the harp and would wake him up. So at midnight he would get up and he would daven and praise Hashem. And therefore the dawn didn't wake him up. He woke up the dawn, which means that he didn't go to sleep. He was up before dawn.
Take it one step further. What I'm trying to say, I guess, is that he's saying he woke up the dawn, lyre and harp. So this is music that you play, kind of praise to Hashem. He shall awaken the dawn. His excitement, his kavana, is that the word? Kavana,
yeah,
is so great that he's up early and he's there,
right.
and he's the
exactly.
one, putting on his tefillin first thing in the morning and gung ho and all that.
Not before dawn, but yes. The only issue, yeah, but yes.
He's ready to take on the day and devote his day to Hashem.
Right.
Like he's so excited, he's up beforehand to do that.
Very good. So the Alshich, we mentioned in the previous pasuk, the Alshich says that Nachin Libi Alikim, that I prepare myself spiritually, and then I sing Hashem's praises, and that's what brings down the divine Shekhinah. So he says, in this pasuk, he's saying, sometimes I'm not ready, right? And my heart is not ready. Nachin Libi, try to get my heart ready, but my heart is not ready. And nonetheless, Ura Nevel V'Chinar, you wake me up through, as the Medrash mentions, through that wind, that northern wind that comes and blows onto the harp, you wake me up so that way I could get up and sing you praises, right? So that's also a similar idea of learning. Pasuk Dalet. I will sing your praises amongst the nations. Said it in two ways. The Alshich says that it's saying that David Melch is saying that I'm sure that the nations will praise you when you treat me with mercy. When the nations see how Hashem treats the Jewish people, what we just talked about, how a missile that could have created tremendous damage, physical damage, but even lives could have been lost, and Hashem with mercy made sure that it fell a few meters away from that. Right? That's when the nations of the world. We didn't get to the time of Mashiach yet, so we're not there yet that the nations could recognize this, that it's literally Hashem is doing. But the Mirz Hashem, when it happens, that Hashem will do it, and the nations will recognize, wow, this is Hashem doing for the Jewish people. The Svarnu says that this pasuk is already talking about the Kibbutz Goliath, about when the Jewish people will return to the land of Israel in the times of Mashiach. Pasuk 5. Higadel me'al shamayim chazdecha v'adshchakim amitecha. So this pasuk, listen to this pasuk. Gadol, it's great. Me'al shamayim. What does me'al mean? Above the heavens, not just up to the heavens, above the heavens. Your kindness is even greater than the heavens. It rises even above the heavens. V'adshchakim amitecha, until the sky is your truth. So what's the story over here? The problem with this is, and every commentary brings it up. It's brought down in the Gemara. It's brought down in different places, saying that there is another pasuk in Tehillim that says that Hashem's kindness, Hashem's chesed, goes until the heavens. So why over here they say that it rises even above the heavens? It's a stira. You know what a stira means? It's a contradiction. Contradiction between two psukim and Tehillim. Which one is it? Is Hashem's kindness until the heavens, or is Hashem's kindness even above the heavens? Right? So Rashi brings down, doesn't mention from the Gemara, but it's from the Gemara. I think it's Rava that says it in the Gemara, that if a person does a mitzvah, does a good deed, lishma, for the sake of Hashem, so just for its own purpose, I'm doing this mitzvah only because of Hashem, so then Hashem's kindness is even above, right? Comes even above this guy. If he's doing it for some ulterior motive, right? Sometimes we do mitzvahs, even though they're good deeds, but we have our own personal reasons, not just because Hashem wants me to do it. I also have my own reasons why I wanted to do it, for whatever reason. It could be good reasons, it's not even necessarily a bad reason, right? But if someone does that and is doing a mitzvah, shalai lishma, so then Hashem's chesed is capped, so to speak. It goes until the heavens, not above the heavens. So that's what the Rashi says. Actually, it's interesting because the previous large Rebbe, he wrote something called Likutei Deburim. It describes different stories from that generation, but also from previous generations. It brings down a story from the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe, he wrote the Tanya, famously wrote the Tanya, and there's some things that he wrote in Tanya that, at least at that point in that generation, people were a little bit uncomfortable. So he was once, if I remember correctly, he was in Shklov, a town called Shklov, and there's a lot of elderly sages, not Chassidim, didn't know Chassidic philosophy, and they asked him a lot of questions, like, how could you write? What's the source of this? What's the basis for this? One of the things Alter Rebbe says is that if you serve Hashem but without awe and fear, without awe and love, without av and yira, without love and awe of Hashem, so your Torah and mitzvahs get stuck. So it's similar to a story that the Baal Shem Tov once said. They say about the Baal Shem Tov that he came to a shul and he tried to walk in the door and he couldn't walk into the door. He says, "Why? Like everybody else walked in." So yeah, so he says the shul. I'm trying to remember the details. He says the shul is full of prayer. You'd think that's a compliment, right? He says, "No, the prayers aren't going up." They ain't stuck in the shul. And if I remember correctly, he gave them a way that they should daven in a proper way, so that way their tefillos should rise above and shouldn't get stuck in the shul. But the Alter Rebbe says that doing Torah mitzvah, studying Torah and learning and doing mitzvahs, and if you don't do it with awe and love of Hashem, it's nothing. He doesn't say it's nothing. He says something to that effect. So they ask him, what's the basis? They asked the Alter Rebbe, what's the basis for making rendering such a halacha? So the Alter Rebbe's first answer was a zohar. So the sage in Shklov turned to the Alter Rebbe and says, we don't take halacha from the zohar. The zohar is Kabbalah, Kabbalistic, and Kabbalah is great, and you could learn Kabbalah, but you can't learn halacha from Kabbalah. Halacha has to come from a Gemara. You have to have a source in a Gemara. So the Alter Rebbe brought this Gemara, the Gemara that we just mentioned, that Rashi brings on this pasuk, saying that if you do something lishma, if you do something shalai lishma, if you do a mitzvah, but not for the sake of heaven, you do it for some ulterior motive, there's a cap until the sky, right? And there's a cap till the heavens. And if you do it for the sake of heaven, so then that cap doesn't exist. Hashem's chesed comes in. He says, "Oh, that's a good answer, right? Because what does it mean? That when you do it for ulterior motives, that's without awe and love. When you do it on love, so there's a higher source." And that was the answer the Alter Rebbe gave them. So yeah, based on this, not based on this pasuk, but it answers the contradiction. The Gemara is based on this pasuk. There's other answers to that question also, right? What was the question? The contradiction between the two psukim. So the Radak says that the pasuk that says that Hashem's kindness is until the heaven, David HaMelech was talking about himself. So he doesn't want to be boastful that Hashem's kindness comes not only from the heavens, comes beyond the heavens. When he was talking about himself, so he said Hashem's kindness it rises all the way to heaven. Right? But when he's talking about the salvation of the Jewish people, when Mashiach comes, no, then Hashem's kindness comes even beyond that. Hashem's kindness comes from beyond the heavens. Pasuk 6. Ruma. Al Shamayim Elikim Val Telaretz Kvedecha. This is also, for the most part, the most commentaries say are talking about times of Mashiach. That, and Matsuda says over here, show everybody that you sit in the heavens, Ruma, that you're in control, that everything that goes on earth doesn't happen by its own, it doesn't happen through its own doings. It happens because Hashem controls everything that happens here in this world. The Me'amlei says that it's a continuation from the previous pasuk of the kindness being above the heavens. So who's above the heavens? That's the source that's coming from Hashem, right? Hashem's blessings, when it comes to us, sometimes could go through an intermediary. A blessing could come through the sun. Right? Oh, nice weather finally. A blessing that comes through the sun. Or if you're a farmer, even a greater blessing. The sun, the rain maybe is a greater blessing. Tomorrow that we're going to have rain is a greater blessing than today having sun, right? If you're a farmer. So Hashem's blessings come through other intermediaries. So Memlei says that the previous pasuk says that Hashem's kindness comes from above the heavens. But who's there? Hashem is above Elikim. Hashem is above in the heavens and giving us those blessings. Pasuk Zayin number 7. In order for Hashem to rescue His friends, His acquaintances, His people, and Hashia Yemincha Vaneni, bring us salvation from your right hand and answer us. This is, by the way, verse 7. Starts the next the quote from chapter 60. So from here, from verse 7 until the end through verse 14, which is 8 verses, is talking from the other chapter, which was about David Melech's war in Aram Naraim and Aram Tzoyla. So the Metzudah says that verse 7 is saying that in order to save your beloved, right? In order to save your beloved, bring salvation through your right hand and answer me. Meaning that in the beginning of the pasuk, it seems that it's being plural, that David Melech is talking about plural, helping the people, but also Aneni, answer me, that is David Melech on his own. The Alshich says that it's not even talking about David, it's talking about David Melech's descendant. Who's David Melech's descendant? Famously, didn't come yet. Mashiach, that's coming from David Melech, right? So Hashia Yeminach Vaneni is David Melech saying, help Mashiach, help Melech Mashiach who comes from David. Pasuk Ches, number 8. Elikim Dibur B'Kodshoy. That Hashem, you spoke in your holiness, right? So Rashi says, Hashem says that there will be a time that I will be king, right? That Elikim Dibur B'Kodshoy, Hashem said in the holy manner that David Melech will be king one day. This is still when he's at that war, so it's talking about David Melech. And then it talks about the separation of Shechem. So the Metzudah says that David Melech is saying that I'll divvy up different parts of Eretz Yisrael that are now inhabited with idol worshippers to divvy it up between the Jewish people. The Alshich says that the previous pasuk is talking about Mashiach, right? Descendant of King David is talking about Mashiach. So this pasuk is, how do we know this about Mashiach? That's what? That Hashem is going to bring salvation through Mashiach. How do we know this? So because this is what pasuk 8 is coming to tell us, Elikim Dibur B'Kodshoy, because Hashem has spoken in His holiness with ruach, okay, this divine intuition, with the divine messages that He gave about Mashiach. Pasuk Tes number 9. Ligilad, Limanashe, V'Ephraim, Moiz, Yeroshi, Yehud, Mechayki. So we're talking about the different parts of Eretz Yisrael, Gilad, and the parts that belong to Menashe, and the parts that belong to Ephraim. So the Metzudah says that David HaMelech saw with divine prophecy, with Ruach HaKodesh, that there's going to be a split in the kingdom, Malchus Yehuda and Malchus Yosef, right? But when Mashiach comes, we'll all be under one kingship, right? That even what's Menashe and Ephraim represent Yosef, right? So even Yosef that was separated, and even the parts that had their own kingdom, they'll all come back to Yehuda Mechaykiki, to Yehuda, my prince, to Mashiach that comes from Shevet Yehuda, that comes from David HaMelech. Number 10, Moyav Sir Rachzi. So Rashi and Tzudis and others say that this is an analogy that Hashem will do with these nations what he wants to do with the Edomites, with the Moabites, that Hashem is going to do what he wants with them. So he talks about a wash basin, washing his feet, doing what he wants. The Alshich says that it's talking about Mashiach, and it's talking about the fact that there will be no opposition to the fact that David HaMelech ultimately, right? You could trace back his lineage to a Moabite woman, because it's like washing, just like when you wash. You can, let's say you have dirty hands and the dirt stays behind, right? So David Melch says that it's like, that's the idea of washing, and therefore nobody will have, there'll be no opposition to David or Mashiach coming from David, because it's going to be cleaned up. So that's the reference to the washing over here. Pasuk 11. Rashi says Pasuk 11 is talking about time of Mashiach, as he says, who will bring me to a fortified city, who will lead me to Moav, right? Which is time of Mashiach, because we're not gonna deal with Edom, we're not gonna deal with Moav until Mashiach comes. So it's talking about the time of Mashiach. Mitzudah says that it's more of an idea of who will give me strength to go to these places, right? Me, who's going to give me the strength? Hashem is going to give me the strength to go and to wage war by Moav and Edom. Sfarnu says that the first part, who's going to take me to fortified cities, the first part is talking about retribution to those who destroyed the first base of Mikdash, and the second part about the Edomites is talking about those who destroyed the second temple, the second base of Mikdash. Pasuk 12, so did Hashem ever forsake us? Won't Hashem come out and help us out in our wars? So it says, just like in troubled times, the troubles come from Hashem, so too the salvation comes from Hashem, right? That if Hashem zinachtanu, Hashem forsaken us, but Hashem will also come and save us. Nothing happens by happenstance, everything comes directly from Hashem. Pasuk 13, Havalanu ezras mitzar, give us some help against our adversary, right? Vishav Chuvas Adam, and we can't rely on humans for this. The Alshich says that when salvation comes from Hashem, it's eternal. When salvation comes from another human, so it's good today, but we don't know what it will be tomorrow. So we just went through an election here in Canada, right? We need this to happen in order for safety of Jewish people in Canada, for safety of Jewish people in Eretz Yisrael, for safety that we need this to happen. But Hashem has His plan. What we really need is to make sure that Hashem makes sure that we're safe. Of course, we have to do our part, and part of our part is to vote who we think is the most capable to make sure that we're taka safe, etc., etc. But at the end of the day, how does the pasuk 13 end? Shav chuas adam. Futile is the help of man. We can't rely on the help of man. We have to do what we can for that. But ultimately, as the beginning of the pasuk says, Havalanu ezras mitzar, we ask that Hashem should help us and rise against our adversaries. Pasuk 14, the final pasuk, with Hashem's help, we will be very successful. V'hu yavos sarenu, and he'll trample our oppressors. Memleah says, obviously, a typical ending to a chapter of Tehillim of King David, that he ends off with his great trust with Hashem. That Belikim Nasachayel. It could look bleak today. It could look like there's no answer today, but with Hashem's help, everything is going to go well, and that's the tremendous faith and trust that David HaMelech had in Hashem. Mitzvah says that with Hashem's help, we were going to be strong enough in order to accomplish the things that we asked for in previous verses. And the Sfarnu says that with Hashem's help, we'll have the strength and we'll add courage in our Torah and mitzvahs by teaching many students. We're going to add and we're going to grow. Chayil is like an army, so we're going to grow and add in our spiritual pursuits, in our doing mitzvahs, and in our learning of Torah, and adding students to that, and that will Yavas Sarenu, that will trample our enemies, our oppressors. With that, we finish chapter 108.
Yeah, very nice chapter.